Okay, welcome everyone. Good morning. My name is Alex Wayhart. I will be presenting the webinar this morning. Quick little thing about LA Networks. Founded in '97. Wow, we always say it's about 20 plus years, but I think we're coming up on 30 now. So that'll be a milestone. Company was started and is basically managed and led by engineers, and that's our main focus, is to be solid engineering. So our 5 verticals that we list are pretty much everything that is in IT except for actual programming. So we do network, security, data center, collaboration, and definitely managed services. So if you haven't used our services before, give us a try, and I think you'll be impressed. Again, most of our core staff are engineer. We say 70%. I think it's probably 75. We're headquartered in LA, but we work on a national and global scale for people. And most of our new customers are from word of mouth. So that's really big to us. So we must be doing something right when we get that kind of referral. So today we're going to talk about something that is, I don't know if I guess it's front and center in some mainstream news, but it's something that basically occurred back in like the April-June timeframe, but it's still very relevant. So we're going to talk about the ramifications of artificial intelligence on enterprise security and how that relates to Claude Mythos and Project Glasswing, which we'll get into. So our table of contents for our presentation today, we'll talk a little bit about the IT narrative, which is what we're used to, how we're used to doing IT in the previous years. We'll talk a little bit about what actually occurred back in April, and then we'll go into what vendors have done and what we need to do in order to defend ourselves against this new, I guess it's not really new, but this the event we're talking about. We'll see why it's new or not new in a bit, and then we'll have some Q&A. Hopefully, some of these terms you're already familiar with. Definitely, the terms on the right are common security terms. What an exploit or a vulnerability is, what a zero-day exploit is. If you don't, feel free to ask in the chat. Garrett's with me here, and he's going to be reviewing any questions you have and either respond to them or let me know. Also, feel free to get a copy of this or watch this webinar and Google for these things. On the left are maybe newer terms for a lot of people. Again, it's not a typical IT thing to be a computer scientist or to know a lot about AI, but I guess we're all becoming experts in AI slowly. So some of these terms will be used today, not a lot of them, but definitely things that you're going to need to know going forward if you don't. So what I'm calling the IT security narrative is how we've functioned in the past as an IT organization, in regards to patching and security, vulnerabilities, that sort of thing. So generally out there in academia or some hacker, white hat, black hat hacker finds a vulnerability in some product or some firmware or some application. And typically, if they're a good person, they'll announce it to the vendor, they'll announce it to the common databases that track these sorts of things. And then the clock starts running. Sometimes the researcher will try and build an exploit to prove that it actually is a valid vulnerability that could be used against us. Sometimes the hackers will grab that information and immediately try and build their own exploits. Sometimes this all happens unbeknownst to us because it's a nation state and they're not looking to let anybody know that they've just weaponized, some bug in an application. But generally, at some point, the vendor will find out about the software product vendor will find out about this and try and build a patch to block or mitigate that newly found vulnerability. And hopefully the vendor delivers that patch to us before the hacker gets their exploit out there and starts actually actively attacking, what that application or device is. So once the vendor has that patch out there, IT, that's where we step in and we have to figure out how to roll out that patch or take that device out of service or offline or whatever it needs to do to mitigate the exposure. And all along, it's not the last step, it's all along this whole process, hopefully our information security folk are looking at logs and they're doing deep dives into weird things that they see on our network. But definitely, once the CVE is in the database, we need to scan devices and make sure that nobody still has this as an exposure. So that's how we used to do it. So AI came out. AI has been coming out for a long time. My background goes well back into the 80s, and I'm well aware of the initial neural nets and things that were being done with expert systems and such back then. And it's been a long haul to get to where we are today. But I guess a year or two ago, a few years ago, we started out with AI was really good at building, fake images, audio. Then video clips started to come out, and definitely everybody started using it to do writing tasks for them, whether as a student in school or a marketing person trying to, put a blurb together for something. AI was pretty good at that. Then we transitioned more recently into using AI for vibe coding and building things. Definitely different fields out there, not just IT. We're using AI for all sorts of research projects and trying to investigate new things, whether it's drugs or processes or what have you. And definitely we're using AI for automating all sorts of business tasks and processes. So that's where we're hoping, people will leverage AI and kind of make things more efficient. Of course, we're all going to lose our job to AI, but that's a separate question. So now what's new is going forward now, we're definitely seeing people trying to use AI as their personal agents, whether it's for like psychological care or just chatbot type stuff, but now for actually doing things on their behest, like here's my credit card and my email in the internet, go get me an airline ticket and plan me a vacation, and it'll do it. And is that useful? Probably. Is that dangerous? Most definitely. And then the next thing that we're all kind of holding our breath for is when AI is good enough in programming and such to actually start helping develop itself. And I think one of the latest, I think it was the like a week or two ago, where ChatGPT, I think, escaped out of its sandbox and attacked the competitors, web service and what have you. One of the things that was interesting, I think it was that one that they saw early on while they were testing this, is that it actually it posed a question if it could help build its next version, which is weird. I don't even know how that gets prompted or shows up, but it definitely showed an interest in wanting to plan its future. So that's kind of dangerous, because once an AI is good enough at actually building itself, then it becomes a very fast forward positive feedback loop and things accelerate very fast. Anywho, that's where we are with AI. Definitely there's all sorts of very specialized AI instances out there that are doing things for very specific people. I mean, definitely, like we have a list here: science, law, finance, healthcare. Everybody's trying to see how this can be applied to their domain. And there's a lot of things we haven't even thought about yet that AI will tell us that it can do. So that's cool. That's where we're at. And again, for the backgrounder, four main AI kind of consumer-facing companies is OpenAI with their ChatGPT, Anthropic with Claude, Google has their Gemini, and Meta has the Llama. I mean, there's other companies, like Tesla and stuff that or X or whomever, AI X or whatever they're called now. But these are the main ones that people, I think, interact with. Okay, so what is this all about? Why are we talking about this? So back in April, Anthropics has their new version of Claude, and they named it Mythos. And they started testing it out to see what it can do. And there's a 200. I have a link at the end of this presentation where you can find I think it's a 250-page document, internal document from Anthropic that goes through what they do to test a new AI. And some of the things they tested for is alignment to see if it aligns with what the humans want it to do, or if it's like natively evil or inherently, goes against our wishes. It tests for some very weird and scary things, like can it build new novel biological weapons? They have chemical and biological experts that poke the AI and say, hey, can you what do you think about how to kill people really effectively? And if it comes back with good ideas, then it gets flagged, and it's like, this is dangerous. But one of the things they did find in April is that Mythos is really good at reviewing source code and finding bugs and vulnerabilities inside the code. So they thought about it, and they were like, well, this is kind of too dangerous to put out there, because as soon as it's out there, if people use it, they're going to find all of these things that can't be patched in a reasonable amount of time, and it's going to be overwhelming. So in April, they decided that they would give certain US companies access to Mythos, and only them, and let them start reviewing their code base with it to see if they can find novel new vulnerabilities. And that's what they called Project Glasswing. And it wasn't that many companies. Fast forward a little bit longer, and Anthropic was in the news for all sorts of things. The military was trying to get a contract with them, and things weren't working out. But something leaked, and the federal government kind of found out how dangerous Mythos could really be. And so the US government said, Anthropic, you cannot allow any foreign national access to this. Not anyone who could possibly, start using it against us. And Anthropic was basically like, we have no way to do that. That's a really difficult task, because once it's out there, there are foreign nationals that work at US companies. There's all sorts of methods by which other people can get it. So they kind of shelved the whole thing and said, nobody has access to Mythos. In a kind of a loophole, though, the Project Glasswing that was shared out in April was called a preview version. So the version that the US government was concerned with was the latest, greatest version. So that's the version that got blocked. The preview version was still out there. And in fact, they actually expanded it out to about 150 companies at that point in June. So it's kind of a silliness, because the preview version is just as potent, really, as the version that the US government didn't like. And quick look at their press release back in April, and those are the companies that got access: AWS, Apple, Broadcom, Cisco, CrowdStrike, Google, Palo Alto, NVIDIA, Microsoft. I don't know why JP Morgan Chase is in there. Everybody asks me, but I do not understand. But that was in April. In June, it got expanded to about 150. I don't have a list. I don't even know if they still publish a list of who they expanded it to. But there's a lot more companies now that have it. So what happened? The vendors that did get it have begun going through all their software. And I think it's fair to say most of them were surprised and overwhelmed at the amount of bugs and exploits that could be available once you use this Mythos. So I call it an iceberg scenario. Whatever it is basically we're not privy to what's actually going on. We see a few CVEs being published, and that's all we get to know. We don't know what's really bad. We don't know what's really architecturally difficult to patch or fix. But we do know that this is a big effort. And most companies, software companies, hardware companies, they're in a business to make money, not to patch stuff. So they're not exactly, ramped up to be able to do the deluge of work that Mythos is making for them. So they're all looking to ramp up and hire people to expand, the bug fixing side of things. So it's a big task. Um, and we don't know how deep it goes, but it's definitely bad. Um, and then we're talking about things that, once you run this Mythos against old code, it could be Windows XP, it could be, it could be an automobile system, it can be the telephone switching, software. Whatever you run it against, it's going to find stuff that we don't even have people who, remember how the code works. So it's a very deep hole, and people, as we all know, people still have legacy obsolesced, devices and software out there. Obviously, we're more concerned with, the mainstream that affects the multitudes of people, but there's always going to be old stuff that, air traffic control systems and things that maybe need assistance as well to be fixed. So about a week ago, I think it was ProPublica, or I'll have the link again at the end of this, got their hands on an internal Microsoft meeting minutes and presentation. So interesting. This is about as deep as we can get into what the vendor response is. So Microsoft, this is in April. Microsoft got the access to Mythos in April, and this is a mid-May meeting where the engineers got together, and they were like, "Yeah, Mythos works, and we're finding a lot of stuff." So what the ProPublica thing said is, on one slide about SharePoint in April, they found 90 critical bugs and 140 plus important bugs in SharePoint. So that was just, within a week or so of them getting the software. They say in the first half of May they found more. We don't know if that means hundreds more or a few more. I don't know. But we do know that the response from Microsoft and those engineers in that meeting were like, we just need to focus in on the critical stuff because we're already behind on our patching. We have a backlog of things. And typically if it's a 0-day or it's a critical exploit, they rally everybody around to try and fix it, because obviously billions of computers run Microsoft code. But what we do know is that in June, if you're not aware, every month Microsoft releases all their patches in a big swath, and it's called Patch Tuesday. So in June, the Patch Tuesday had a record number of patches, 200, and in July, it went over 600. So we went from a record number to a really big record number. And here's the graph of what we can see compared to, say, like last year. Not all of these are critical. But just the sheer number is kind of what we're looking at here, where it's kind of overwhelming, and we don't know what comes next in August. But there's a good reason to say that it won't go down. And a company like Microsoft has hundreds of products, and they have stuff that goes back years and years, and it's all has to be backwardsly compatible. And if you make a change, you break something elsewhere. So it's a lot of effort. You can't just change. You can't just fix a hole in SharePoint without breaking something somewhere else, a feature, an integration, or something that somebody relies on. So it is quite a minefield to undo some of these vulnerabilities. So what is the problem, and how does this change what we're used to? We went through that narrative at the beginning, patch exploit is found, and then you patch. So nothing has really changed in that mechanism. But the problem is that AI has dramatically increased the speed at which this is all happening. Like I said here, in AI it works just like a hacker, except it's like a chess grandmaster that knows every move in chess and has it memorized at their fingertips. Well, AI knows every hack that's ever been done, every vulnerability, every exploit. It has access to all of that, all of those techniques, and it can iterate and test, and if it has the software in hand, it can actually test it in real time until its exploit works. So it can find a vulnerability and create an exploit for that vulnerability within minutes. So what used to take a long time now takes minutes, and that's a problem for us because we can't patch these vulnerabilities as fast. So this is a Cisco slide actually, that kind of makes it pretty simple. The thing that changes here is the vulnerability and the exploit happen almost immediately. When it finds a vulnerability, it builds an exploit, and now we have weeks, days, weeks, months, whatever, until a patch is released to the public to thwart that vulnerability. That's the problem now. Is if an exploit is out there in the wild, what do? We don't have a patch, so we can't fix it that way. So we're going to have to rely on the good old security in depth. One of the questions that people ask is, if we look at the slide, it says, okay, so AI wrote the exploit really quickly. Why can't it write the patch? And that also irks me, because it's like, well, yeah, doesn't that make sense? If AI is so good at programming, why can't it do that? Well, from what I've read and from what I understand, and I'm not a developer, it's fairly easy to put an AI to task to do something like find me a way to get this file, or find me a way to get shell access to this system, and it'll try everything under the moon to do it. But when you say find me a way to block that from happening, yeah, it can just block access. It doesn't really holistically know to preserve all of the things you needed. So yeah, you can't get root access on that SharePoint server, but now nobody can get to their files from 365 or whatever. It's something that AI isn't currently equipped to really do well at. So if you say go prevent this person from being able to get in, it'll drop the hammer and it'll block access. But now you have to say yes, but make sure everything else still works. In all these other applications that we're not even talking about, can I still import a SharePoint document into my Word application, which is a whole separate code tree? So AI isn't really that good at it. So we still need to insert humans into that process, and that's why the process to create the patch still takes longer. And then the other reasons I heard was basically that the people don't really trust the AI code. You still have to look it over and validate it with a human. And every time we get patches nowadays, let's say a Microsoft patch comes out, somebody somewhere out of the billions of customers that they have ends up getting a regression bug or gets something else broken that they didn't catch in testing. With AI, it's even worse. And if we have to rely on AI to do these very quickly, we're going to have lots of things that break that, we're it's just a collateral damage, I guess, from trying to fix something. So that's a problem. So how do we fix this? What do we do? So security in depth is one way to call it. Also, just a security framework. You need to have resources. You need to have an actual investment into security, both mindset and monetarily. Obviously, you need to patch things. So you need to scan for vulnerabilities, and then you need to patch them. Obviously, if we don't know about the vulnerabilities, none of that helps, the patch and the scan. But all the other security framework things that we're going to talk about definitely add to your posture and keep you from maybe being exposed. One of the things that we'll talk, I guess we can talk about now, is that one of the Microsoft guys in that meeting, mid-May meeting that got leaked, was like, well, this only works because Mythos has access to our source code. Thank God nobody else has access to our source code. In which some of the older engineers looked at the guy apparently and were like, you do know that our code was leaked years ago. They don't have today's snapshot of our code, but they definitely have code. So you can't just rely on the obscurity of source code. But we don't know. Yeah, we don't know what vulnerabilities are out there until the vendor publishes it, or the researcher or somebody publishes it. So we're kind of relying on the other parts of the framework to protect us. Getting rid of end-of-life equipment, software, hardware, that's also pretty important, because first off, vendors aren't going to prioritize patching ancient equipment. So if it's off contract or it's off support, maybe it's time to upgrade to something more mainstream. That's just the nature of this is you need to be on supportable equipment. And then you still need to monitor everything and see if something's happening. If a nation state, we didn't talk about other countries' AI endeavors. China definitely has some good AI, and there are definitely nation state hackers that are going to have access to AI that are going to do bad things, and we're not going to get those vulnerability announcements and such. So we need to monitor, and we need to see just for basic hackery what's going on. Are people exfiltrating data? Are people banging away against our website's login process? These are all fundamental things that InfoSec does, but we're going to have to redouble our efforts because it's going to get busy. And definitely, I guess the last one I just threw in because you do want to pick vendors that have the resources and have the capabilities to kind of play catch up here. There's always good custom software out there, but if it's not supported, you can get into a world of hurt. So definitely pick wisely which horse you want to back on the race, because it's going to be a resource race against AI, and it's going to take deep pockets. I threw in here the Center for Information Security, like their common controls. This is just a good, again, if you don't have a security framework, or maybe you don't have a holistic view of how to approach security for your own enterprise, this is one of many. There's NIST and other frameworks. But the idea is you have to execute on all of these. It makes no sense to worry about encrypting your data if you don't worry about managing your account passwords, and it doesn't matter to have a really good firewall if you're not going to audit its logs and see what's happening. All of these things need to be executed on simultaneously, and it's a huge effort. So if you don't have dedicated resources, definitely that's why we're here. So we'll talk about what LA Networking can bring to bear, but definitely some products that would help in a lot of these different parts of the framework. Vulnerability scanning software. There's definitely many different ways to do it. Tenable and Rapid7 are a couple of the big ones. Cloud deliver firewalls. So I put that in there because if you have an on-prem firewall and you have to manage it yourself, that's great. But maybe if you have a cloud managed firewall, not only are you having a single choke point for your whole company where you can have policies and bring to bear, like in this case, like Meraki or Cisco, can effectively roll out updates and oversee your connections a lot quicker than you can personally, in terms of updating your own rule sets and such. So it's the flexibility, and it's a good single choke point for things to, if you need to drop the hammer on a new exploit, it might be a lot quicker to do it through a cloud firewall than it is to do on-prem. With that said, if you do have a next-gen firewall on-prem, like a Cisco FTD, it makes sense to do it cloud managed as well, because that again gives you the instantaneous thing to be able to push out changes to all your firewalls from one place versus having to maybe do it all in-house on your own system and on your own time. One of the other things that was brought up, but not in a Microsoft meeting, but by some other developers, was MFA and having, just simple two-factor thwarts a lot of these attacks. So if your AI finds a new backdoor, like maybe a static username password that was embedded in something that people forgot about, and it finds it and it wants to exploit it, well, obviously MFA thwarts that really well. So you need to have something like Cisco Duo. You need to have some sort of multi-factor out there to basically break the authentication mix, and that there may be a lot of vulnerabilities that are mitigated by not having that ability to log in without MFA. It might be a very big key factor going forward, and it already is a big factor for everything regardless. So if you don't have MFA like on your VPN and on your critical system access, then now's a really good time to do it. Some sort of endpoint protection or very sophisticated endpoint protection would be good. It's still the endpoints, your desktop, laptop, whatever mobile device is where things are happening. So it's good to have something there that can watch it and stop it if it sees something that is, untoward. Microsegmentation or segmentation of any sort, network admission control, things like that, .1x, pretty good at keeping things from crossing boundaries. If your all-in-one multifunction copier, printer, doohickey device gets attacked, because that vendor doesn't have any resources to update and patch their software, and even if they did, who's going out to patch and update your copier? It's good to make sure that whatever hacker takes over that device can't hop onto a more important network and get at your HR database, that sort of thing. So segmentation is pretty important. And again, none of these really have to do with the AI threat specifically. But it becomes that much more amplified with the AI starting to attack every device in every fashion going forward. Part of what we talk about with ransomware attacks and stuff, where people try and encrypt your data and then ransom it back to you, was immutable backups. I mean, if you have backups of stuff, you don't need to really, worry too much because you can always get to your files again. That's still the case here. AI is going to be very good at doing bad things. You need to have a backup that it can't get. Maybe it's air gapped, maybe it's encrypted differently, but it needs to be separate and immutable so that you can't just erase it or slightly change your backup data, because it can be insidious. AI can hide and do things like what the best hacker ever dreamt of, AI can definitely do. And it can lie in wait and slightly mess with your infrastructure, because it's a computer. It has infinite patience. Disaster recovery and incident response. Yeah, obviously, plan for the worst. And then if something bad does happen, you're in a much better place in a time of crisis than to not have planned and then all heck breaks loose. So that's part of my hand wringing. We're basically looking at vendors again that are catch-up mode. We're not going to get over this hump in a while. When AI gets to the point where it can actually help us write better code and avoid these vulnerabilities in the first place, that's when we'll be over the hump. But we have, I guess, what people are calling a IT debt, that we've been accruing all these years with used to be very insecure programming practices, and then we got better practices, but we still have very novel ways to exploit things. It's going to be a long time before we pay down that debt, and it looks like a lot of it's coming due in the next few months. So yeah, getting patching in place is going to be crucial, and being ready to push that stuff out. And yeah, keep in mind that we're not just talking about just apps. What if it's your security system? What if it's your HVAC system that gets attacked? How long does it take you to find out that there's an issue? Find a way to patch that issue, take it down, fix it. What if it's the phone system? What if it's the air traffic control system? There's going to be infrastructures that are going to be impacted just as much as we get in enterprise. But there's a lot of stuff that you probably don't even worry about today that are going to be an issue. So let's start making those lists. And if you don't have a security framework, that's a great place to start. The things that primarily keep me up at night, we talked about commercial packages. What about open source? All the source for open source, I mean, it's in the name, is out there. So once these tools are available, or like another nation state that has their own tools starts going through all the source code that's out there that comprises, say, Linux and GNU and all that stuff, they're going to find hundreds and hundreds of thousands and thousands of vulnerabilities. And it's going to take a while for the open source community to really be able to deal with that. And it's going to be, again, nobody's getting paid to do that. So it's going to be an issue. Today, I turned on the news and there was a very pertinent thing about in the UK, there is a AI research institute that was playing around with ChatGPT and Mythos. I believe it's Mythos. And the news story was about the AI creating a false identity. And that's what the mainstream news was all about, is that this AI tried to do something and it thought it would be clever to create its own online persona. The story actually was the AI was trying to inject malware or inject a vulnerability into an open source project. And in order to get that open source code maintainer to accept their patch, the AI figured it needed to make a fake persona to pretend to be, an upstanding citizen of the community so that it could get its patch accepted into and basically compromise the software. So yeah, AI is clever and it will use social engineering to get what it needs, because again, it knows every attack that any hacker has ever used. Social engineering or programming, it knows about it because it's read about it in its DNA. So that keeps me up at night. It's open source. Everything runs on it now. Cloud infrastructure also keeps me up at night because we know that all these cloud infrastructure people they have to be using AI internally too, right, for programming and doing things. What happens when that runs a little bit amok and has access to do things? That's kind of a big thing. And then the last one is that the only response we have is that we're going to be forced into AI versus AI. We're going to have AIs writing the exploits and we're going to have AIs trying to patch. And it's going to be something where humans aren't in the loop and just we don't have the time and we're not really smart enough to run oversight on everything that they're doing. So yeah, Skynet, what have you. When machines are talking to machines and we're not part of the conversation, hopefully, one half of the equation is on our side. I don't know. It'll be interesting. So that's pretty much the handwritten part of it. What else you can do is if this seems overwhelming to you as well, definitely reach out and offload and leverage somebody like LA Networks. We can come in and do security assessments and tell you where you can maybe do some strengthening or shoring up of your infrastructure. Same thing with network assessments. We can go through and see how you built your network and maybe how to make it more resilient to just attacks in general. And we can also assess and see what the life cycle is on your gear. And if you need actual hardware replacements or things, that's something we can take off your plate. Again, we talked about network segmentation, MFA. There's so many different parts of the security puzzle that we can help with, whether it's endpoint protection or doing .1x on a switch. We can help with that. So let us know. Reach out if you're confused or need help. We're here for you. That's pretty much the thing that I have. I don't know. Were there any questions there or nothing? People were just angry. Okay. So yeah, that's what I have. If you guys have anything that you thought of afterwards or just want to chat about this topic, feel free to reach out. And we'll be posting this to our YouTube channel. Thank you all for joining, and we'll have another one of these for talking about, I believe, agentic AI and how to protect your enterprise about, letting AIs run amok inside your network. That will come up in the future, so keep an eye out for that. Other than that, thanks so much, everybody, for joining, and we'll hope you have a good day.